Though, of course, it's still going to be a party this year, but there will be a different tone. Tonight kicks off this 2-day LA Pride Festival. I mean, you take a look around here. You see many of the same colors, of course, the balloons, the beautiful lanterns, and as we pan over, all the stages that are nearly set. But the message this year will be different, much more political, more urgent. Take a look. Thousands of people expected to attend not only the LA Pride Festival here at West Hollywood Park, like they do every year, but the Resist March, as it's being called, happening Sunday. Organizers say they were inspired by the Women's March and to support everything that stood for. So this year's festivities are taking on an anti-Trump approach, making that stronger political statement. Organizers say this community is behind them all the way.
This is where the first ever Pride Parade took place in 1970, and it was in response to the Stonewall riots in New York the year before. Our roots were protest, and we're back in the streets protesting this year. Instead of floats and people on the sidewalks, we're not going to have any floats, and we want the people on the sidewalks, in the streets, marching with us in solidarity.
We're trans women, trans men, gender nonconforming people. We are all people, and we are all human beings, and we all deserve love and respect.
Because I believe that we're all one, and we can all unite, stand together to make a difference.
I think that this is a message of peace and unitedness. We stand together against hatred. We think it's time to stand and stand together.
We begin tonight with the breaking news. The clashes erupting into brawls here at home over Islam. Police pepper spraying dueling demonstrators in Seattle as protesters faced off across the country. The group behind more than 20 planned rallies say they are protesting atrocities committed under Sharia or Islamic law, such as oppression of women and the gay community. But civil rights groups and others accusing those protesters of being just plain anti-Muslim.
Protesters and counter-protesters squaring off across the country tonight, either against the threat of Islamic law or in defense of Muslim Americans. In Seattle, police pepper spraying the crowd. Several people arrested for assault. Angry crowds gathering in at least 20 cities in St. Paul, Minnesota, Austin, Texas, and San Bernardino, California, where protesters gathered in the shadow of the building where 14 people were murdered in 2015 by a husband and wife investigators say were motivated by Islamic extremism.
We are here protesting against a form of government and a religious belief that believed in killing the residents of our city.
The protest organizers, a group called Act for America, say they're against what they perceive as the spread of Islamic law known as Sharia, claiming it contrary to basic human rights and incompatible with our laws and our democratic values.
Enslavement of women, execution of gays, female genital mutilation of 6-year-old little girls. If you are saying that's okay, we as a society have the right to stand up and say no.
No fascist USA! But counter-protesters who showed up today, often in much greater numbers, say the group is out to demonize an entire faith.
This is a thinly veiled march against all Muslims. They're trying to declassify Islam as a religion and frame it as a political ideology so they could deny them the freedom of religion. These are fascists.
And Tom, here in San Bernardino, there were a few skirmishes and 3 arrests, and some of the same police officers who responded to that horrible 2015 shooting just down the street from here were back today helping keep the peace.
Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party has said it is in positive talks over a confidence and supply deal to support Prime Minister Theresa May's Conservative government. The Tories were left tantalisingly short of an overall majority after the leader's gamble on a snap election backfired. Now Mrs May is having to seek support from outside her party in order to form a government, with the anti-abortion and anti-gay marriage DUP being just about her only option. To add to the Prime Minister's woes, Saturday saw 2 of her closest aides quit, taking the blame for her disastrous electoral campaign. Many in the UK, including some within the Conservative Party, have voiced their concerns about a potential deal with the DUP. The right-wing stance of the Northern Irish Party on matters such as gay rights, abortion and climate change have seen many MPs threaten to oppose a deal between the parties. Some are worried that the DUP would drive a hard bargain in exchange for its support. However, no deals will be finalised until next week, as they refuse to work on Sunday for religious reasons.
Breaking news out of Europe, where a car has ploughed into a crowd of people outside Amsterdam's main train station. At least 8 people have been injured and 6 of them have been taken to hospital for treatment. It's understood the driver was parked illegally and sped off when approached by police. He was arrested at the scene and police at this stage have ruled out terrorism.
Ramadan is considered a holy month for Muslims, but it has already seen 16 deadly attacks claimed by ISIS worldwide in 13 days, like last week's London terror attacks. There was also the massive May 26th attack on a bus in Cairo packed with Coptic Christians, which killed 29 people. Then on May 30th, over a dozen people were killed in a bombing at an ice cream shop in Baghdad. On June 5th in Melbourne, Australia, 1 man was shot and killed after a woman was held hostage for hours before escaping.
2 more weeks at least of Ramadan, and ISIS has directed its fighters all around the world to conduct attacks. One thing that's not often discussed is Ramadan, even for non-extremists, is a month where extra benefits are accrued in paradise if you pass away during the month of Ramadan. There's also the belief that you have greater military success against your enemies. So for ISIS to tell their suicide bombers that you're going to be successful and your rewards will be doubled in paradise, it's the easiest way for them to get more attackers to go out in the world. But certainly we can expect more, mostly in the Middle East, more attacks just a few hours ago in Baghdad, and certainly in Europe. But the U.S. also a possibility.
He was the US Attorney General on September 11th and in the 4 years that followed. So John Ashcroft, on the right of George W. Bush here, should have a good understanding of Middle East politics. Qatar's government has hired Ashcroft's law firm to examine and confirm what Doha is doing to stop financing of banned groups and comply with money laundering regulations. Since Monday, Qatar has been cut off diplomatically and physically by Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the UAE and Egypt. Bahrain's foreign minister has been in Turkey, where he's reiterated his view that Qatar is supporting Iran and banned organisations. Qatar says it does not support what its accusers call Islamist terror groups. Continuing his diplomatic tour, Qatar's foreign minister has been in Russia looking for support. While there, he was asked about Qatari backing of Hamas, which runs Gaza. It's designated a terror group by the US and the EU, but not by Gulf countries. It has representatives in Qatar. Qatar's foreign minister has told Russian media,
"We support the Palestinian people, not Hamas, and we cooperate with the official Palestinian Authority. And Hamas' presence in Qatar is a political representation for the movement. Hamas is a legitimate resistance movement for Arab countries."
Despite many comments that point to the contrary, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman has just stated that he has no interest in reoccupying the Gaza Strip. Speaking to Channel 2 News last night, when asked about what he would do in the event of a future outbreak with Hamas, Lieberman replied, quote, "We go in and destroy all their terror infrastructure, but once the job is complete, we will come out," end quote. Saying Israel would leave the Strip immediately is a far cry from previous statements made where the defense minister claimed a takeover was the only way to quell the violence coming from the coastal enclave. In another surprising turn of face during his interview, though he's often said that he doesn't see a peace deal anywhere in the near future, Lieberman went on to say that Israel is both the safest it's been in 50 years and the closest to a lasting agreement it's ever been. Without giving away any details, Lieberman said he believed the Prime Minister was making a great many efforts towards peace, and that, quote, "If someone comes and puts a deal on the table that includes an agreement with all the moderate Arab states, including the opening of embassies, trade relations, and direct flights, I believe that it will get an overwhelming majority in the Knesset and among the people," end quote.
To a deadly attack on American soldiers overseas, U.S. officials say an Afghan army soldier who was being trained by our troops turned on them, opening fire.
American soldiers ambushed in a deadly insider attack in eastern Afghanistan. According to Pentagon officials, an Afghan army soldier aimed his weapon on U.S. service members there to train him as part of the Train, Advise, and Assist missions. 3 U.S. Army soldiers killed, 1 more wounded. The Taliban says they're responsible, releasing this photo of the alleged attacker who was killed.
If you look at the number of insider attacks since the U.S. has been in Afghanistan, many of these attacks have come from people who have lived or been recruited from the eastern provinces, which are up next to Pakistan, which is traditional Taliban home territory.
The attack in the same province where the U.S. dropped its most powerful non-nuclear bomb on ISIS targets in April. President Trump and Vice President Pence were briefed immediately.
When heroes fall, Americans grieve, and our thoughts and prayers are with the families of these American heroes.
This insider attack, typically called a green on blue attack, is the deadliest in more than a year. And Afghan soldiers, they're also at risk of being targeted by who they think are comrades.
Fortifying their positions. The Syrian Defense Ministry say this video shows its forces digging in along the Iraqi border. It's the first time government troops and their allies have reached the border since 2015. The Russian Ministry of Defense initially made the announcement on Friday. The map shows the rough location in red. And on Saturday, the official announcement from the Syrian military.
We have reached the border with Iraq, northeast of Al-Tanf. This is the completion of the first phase. This victory is important to us because it redirects our strategic battle against ISIL. This area will be the launching point against ISIL along the border with Iraq, and we will cut their supply line.
And as always in Syria, this has implications. Tens of kilometers south is the Tanaf base, used by American and other international special forces to train local allies in the fight against ISIL. They now seem to be effectively blocked from moving north, where ISIL still controls a major border crossing into Iraq and the oil-rich province of Deir ez-Zor. We reached out to the coalition, but they would not comment on this specific development. There have been recent tensions around Tanaf base. The coalition carried out at least 3 airstrikes on Iranian-backed militias who crossed into a surrounding 55-kilometer no-go zone. The Americans say they had repeatedly warned them to turn back.
Control of the Syrian-Iraqi border is strategically important to all sides in this war. It highlights again how complicated the Syrian battlefield is, a complex web of allegiances, each pushing different regional interests. And even though most sides may agree on fighting ISIL, the question is who takes control of the territory they leave behind.
On Sunday, during a news conference in Cagayan de Oro City, Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte made it clear that he did not seek support from the U.S. to aid in ending the siege of a southern Philippines town by Islamist militants. Duterte's message comes just one day after the United States announced it was providing assistance at the request of the government. According to Reuters, when he was questioned about U.S. support against Islamist militants in Marawi City, Duterte said he had never approached America for help.
The son of former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi has been released by a militia group based in western Libya. 44-year-old Saif al-Islam was once considered the heir apparent to his father. He's been held for nearly 6 years after being captured while trying to escape to Niger when opposition fighters seized Tripoli and deposed his father. Saif al-Islam is wanted by the International Criminal Court on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Political activist James O'Keefe is rattling the mainstream media in the United States. He's best known for his undercover investigations with Project Veritas, and now he's got fake news in the crosshairs.
I think there's a lot of voter fraud. They bust them around. They put them in a bus and they move them to poll site to poll site.
What did she see? The caucus cards? You should just hide all that stuff.
It doesn't matter what legal and ethics people say. We need to win this.
Contact engagement in the lines at Trump rallies.
Project Veritas is known for its secret recordings. Last month, it released more than 100 hours from inside the CNN newsroom.
Meanwhile, the group faces a $1 million lawsuit over accusations it used fraudulent means to get an employee a position in a political consultancy, to steal documents and secretly videotape conversations. James O'Keefe was quick to fire back.
Robert Kramer believes that by suing us, he can intimidate us. I will not be silenced, only over my dead body. In fact, we will be deploying a new batch of freshly trained journalists next week to shine additional light on the cockroaches of the corrupt DC establishment. We will not be intimidated. We will not be silenced. We will find out who is funding this lawsuit. We will never stop exposing the truth. We will not back down.
And over to New York, where researchers are planning to release genetically engineered moths that die before they can reproduce. RT's Trinity Chavez has this bizarre story.
Diamondback moths love their vegetables and often chow down on cabbage, cauliflower, but researchers say that these insects are destroying crucifer crops and that something needs to be done. Now, a possible solution to aid this problem could make New York the first state to release genetically modified insects. A problem that has become increasingly difficult since the insects can shrug off most pesticide poisons. In the attempt to eradicate their population, Oxidec has developed a genetically modified moth, which Shelton believes could remedy the situation.
The idea behind the genetically engineered diamondback moth is that the males are sterile, and so when they mate with the wild females, then the offspring basically will not survive, and you'll drive down the pest population and consequently drive down the injury or the damage to the plant.
According to the Associated Press, the moths have been tested in a lab and net-covered fields, but now Shelton wants to see how they do in a 10-acre cabbage patch at the university's experimental agriculture site in upstate New York. However, the idea has garnered health concerns, and many say the creation lacks research.
There most likely will be dead larvae, the brassicas, which are cabbages, broccolis, mustard plants. And there's been absolutely no research done on what would be the consumer health impacts. Also, what would be the impacts for the farm worker if they're inhaling these dead larvae? There's been absolutely no research.
Shelton is now waiting for authorization from the Department of Agriculture, but hopes to test the moths this summer.
The cries were deafening. Coming from a storm drain in New Jersey, a baby deer, scared and alone. Police say the fawn had fallen in, and they worked tirelessly to get it out.
There we go. Let it go, let it go.
Once cops pulled the animal from the drain, they set her on a patch of grass. They were careful not to touch the baby, afraid human scent would throw off the mother when it tried to return. The youngin' was carried across the street after one of the responders said that's where he thought he saw its mother. An update on the Ramapo Police Department's Facebook page says the two were reunited after several hours. There's no doubt the mom must be fawning over her baby after the safe return.